Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to your daily Brighton podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. It is me, your host, Joe Richardson, and today we have a very, very, very special episode. It's international break. Everyone's depressed because it's international break. I'm joined by my boy, Blesses Chibamba. Bless, how are you doing?
Yes, we're doing good, man. It's good to be here. Special episode, first guest. Yep.
So speaking of guests, it is the 20th episode today, and we have got our first guest in. This person is very close to myself and Blessings. Me and this person went to school together, and I'm doing a podcast, and he is an assistant sporting director. So you can obviously tell who paid attention in school. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you football scout, chief scout, 25 years old, by the way, or 26 now, 26 or 25? 25 years old, right? Scout, chief scout, and assistant sporting director, all at the age of 25. It is Jamie Freeman. How are you doing, my friend?
I am very good, and I'm very happy to be here on the 20th episode. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Blessings. Let's go.
Love that.
No problem, mate. So it's basically gonna be a bit of an interview. We don't really do that on this podcast, so we basically don't know what we're doing, but it's gonna be a great episode nonetheless. So in the first segment, we're gonna be delving a bit deeper into the scouting side, getting a bit of inside scoop on what's going on over that way. In the second segment, we're going to be looking at sort of a chief scout role and how a assistant sporting director sort of works. And then in our third segment, we are going to be talking a little bit. We will be relating it to Brighton during the podcast, but the third segment is basically completely Brighton based. We're going to be talking a little bit about our transfer window, how Jamie thinks our transfer window went, where we think we can improve, so on, so forth. So, Jamie, let's just get into it then. So, a little bit of a background of what it is that you do and what you've done would be lovely, mate.
Yeah, so right now I'm based in Croatia working for NK Osijek as chief scout and assistant sporting director. So typically my day-to-day would be as easy as it does sound, is identifying players and then recommending it to the sporting director. This could be all the way from being on Y Scout to negotiating with agents, phone calls with players. That could be live and video. So I've been there since February this year, and I've just finished the window now. So I'm a very happy man. And that's what I'm doing now in Croatia. But where it came from, it's all the way back in 2018 when I started off at Watford. I was at university at the time as a intern at Watford doing recruitment analysis. So this was much more boring than what I'm doing now. I was just doing data sheets on Excel, identifying players in more boring ways. I wasn't watching any games. I was just plugging through transfer market, getting trends up, putting down statistics. And then I made the breakthrough into the scouting world in 2019. And one of my first fixtures, I think, was England under 17s. So this was when I first started to delve into it. So the scouting at Watford went from 2019 to 2020. And then I went to FC Twente within that season where it was lockdown. And that was mainly as a video scout. And I was there for a season. And then I ended up going back to Watford. But this time round, rather than recruitment data analysis, it was live and video scouting. And then this was where I really took a turn in scouting. I delved into emerging talent, which is from under 17s to under 21s, and then senior football as well. And this was when I first got my real taste for like training ground, recruitment meetings, connections with agents, etc. And then just connecting that now to where I am, this was how I ended up in Croatia, actually. So through connections, I managed to get an offer from someone called Jose Boto, and before he was at Benfica, PAOK, and Shakhtar Donetsk, and he asked me to join his project in NK Osijek, a small little town in Croatia. Quite an interesting project. The initial outlook is like a Red Bull group, and that's where I am now. That's where I am now. But the typical day to day for me would be now as well would be to now look for the rest of the season in terms of scouting. So this would be international scouting. So for me, the main aspect for me would be focusing solely on Croatia. So under 21s, under 19s, taking a real hit on that. And one thing that we do have in Osijek, which is quite strong, is we do have a high number of players in our international groups. So we have, for this under 21s, I think we have 6. The under 19s, we have 3. And the under 17s, I think we have 5. So that is our main point. And it's to keep people quite kind of happy. You don't want to bring in too many foreigners like myself and Jose Boto already. So we want to try and keep it as Croatian as we can. But that's where we are now.
Spot on, man. That's actually really interesting to be able to do something for basically in the grand scheme of things. You've done it for such little time. So what, 2018? You said that would have. Mm-hmm. How old would you have been then? You would have probably been.
I was 19.
You would have been 19. Yeah,
the first year of university, and I was scouting all the way till the end of university, and it was a real graft. I remember tired nights. I had to juggle free, like I was working for free at the start as well as an intern. Juggling that with university and another job was very hard, but I feel like these sort of sacrifices helped me get to this point. Of course, along the way, you have to graft the same amount, but this time I'm being paid, so it doesn't feel so bad anymore.
That helps.
That does help for sure. But yeah, I think I'm very step-by-step kind of lucky, but at the same time not. I mean, when you surround yourself at live games and you see the demographic of people, they're like around 50, 60, even retired, and then you jump straight to me who's 25. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of my best friends have gone from being around the same age at university to now 60-year-olds. So I've not kind of had that in yet, but
you're not fitting in with them when they're going out to the pub and that.
Actually, interesting actually, because the only time I would ever go for like a social would be actually for Brighton under 21s games. So this is interesting actually, because there's a harvester. I'll explain. There's a harvester near the training ground, and a lot of the old boys like to go there just before and under 21s games, and a lot of them I don't think actually make it to the game half the time. I've had a lot of times where you're sat there and people say, let's just have one more, and that's when you get to the point where you think we probably shouldn't have one more before the game. But that's where a lot of the old boys go before under 21's game, is the harvester next to, I can't think of the road, but Brighton fans will know what I'm on about. Brighton fans will know.
I love that our first insight of scouting is that scouts love a drink.
Yeah, it does. It does sound very, very easy from my end. I'm not sure where the graft comes from. Actually, it sounds very fun, but I mean, it is. It is.
Yeah.
But
I'm particularly interested in your journey. So you've worked at these different clubs, which is so impressive, especially at like your age already. When you're at the game and you're scouting, you're looking for a player. Were there any differences in what these clubs want, or is it a generic kind of feel of a good player?
Yeah.
Good question. When I was, it depends really, because when I was at Watford, it depends on who you're under. The profiles change. Sporting directors or chief scouts have a different idea. I mean, the first real taste of something different was at Twente, because Watford we could just free roam. At the time before Brexit came in, we had a free roam of South America, all around the world. And really, it was easy. It was kind of easy because you could just plug in the best players. You were in the Premier League at the time. And then when I joined Twente, that was kind of difficult because we had less money to spend. We relied a lot more on data. So then you kind of look for the hidden gems, or maybe the forgotten gems, actually. So what I mean by that is maybe the second division in Holland or the first division in Iceland. Maybe you'll find a 22-year-old who's overperforming, which could suit Twente in the Eredivisie. Whereas in Watford, you wouldn't look for that. You would look for who's ready now, and you wouldn't take the gamble. Whereas at Twente, you had to take the gamble because you didn't have the finances to splash on what everyone knows is the best players. I mean, when you scout, it's easy to know who the best players are because even before the game starts, people talk about who the best players are. But
Yeah.
at Twente, you were kind of alone, and you really had to think hard on whether this gamble's right. And like I said, financially at Twente, we really only had probably around 1 million to spend in the market, unless you sold players. But at the time, we were pushing for Europe, so you didn't want to sell your best assets. And again, financially, the wages are very nice in the Premier League and the Championship for Watford compared to Twente. I mean, we were probably paying like 1/3 of what you could get at Watford. So negotiating wise would have been easier at Watford than Twente. But in terms of actual player, like ability and technical and strength, etc., I can say in the Eredivisie, it was more tactical. The players needed to understand the game from the start, rather than in England they had to be physically ready. I mean, from what you hear in terms of the player's too small for England, etc., you really do hear in the scouting field as well. So there were many times in England where the amount of arguments you would have on players that maybe were too small or not ready yet were ready in the Eredivisie, because it would just be, okay, if they're tactically ready, we can play them. As simple as that. Rather than in Watford, it wasn't just as simple as tactics. And I can understand, because sometimes in the Championship, you do come up against teams that tactics are out the window. They don't really want to play attacking, or even defensive. I'm sure some of them don't even have a real system of play a lot of the time. Whereas Eredivisie, from the bottom club to the top club, is really strong tactical approach. Even in the academies, it's incredible. And then here in Osijek, kind of similar to Eredivisie in terms of tactically ready again, because you can't really take the gamble on whether they're going to be ready yet. They have to be ready kind of now. But also you try to balance potential. You try to develop players. But it's a mixture really of tactical and physical, because our league is very hard going. It's similar to the Championship, where there are some teams that will just park the bus and fight for 1 point, rather than the Eredivisie, everyone fights for 3 points. No one really defends. So it's kind of harder. It's a mixture now of Twente and Watford, and I'm trying to find everything with not so much finances as Watford. But I would say, to be honest, again, just to add on, the Eredivisie as well is a lot more technical than both leagues, I would say. I mean, in the end, Championship would win most of the games against Eredivisie, but the main thing is technical and tactical, whereas the Championship would be more physical, then technical, then tactical. So the first things you look for in the championship is obviously, like I said, the physical. So when you go to an academy game, it's clear, you can see when someone's clearly way above physical. What I mean by that would be the pace of the game. The pace is quite intense in academy. So when you see someone go way above in terms of pace, then you know, okay, wow, they can match the Championship or Premier League in terms of pace. As well, a lot of the time in the under-21s, you see 18 or 17-year-olds play. So when as well they're physically ready in terms of strength, so, wow, okay, then they're very close to playing in the Championship. So for me, those are the two main things: is the pace and the strength. Because I mean, most players now in the under-21s or in England are physically ready in terms of fitness. So it's not really difficult to come across. Rather than here, it's very hard to sound strange, but it's very hard to find players that are ready, especially technical. Because in my opinion, I don't think there's many players that can do a lot of the basics. Honestly, there's a lot of players that miss certain basics, so it makes you question a lot more. Rather than the Championship, you're not thinking too much on the technical. If they have all three, then perfect. Everyone knows of them already,
Yeah.
and they're probably in the Premier League already. So you're not really missing too much, and you're not really the scout that's identified this hidden gem. But that's sort of where, if you have anything else on that, then of course tell me.
Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to it's absolutely fascinating just listening to you talk about this stuff, because a lot of people that are fans, they're obviously, you sit there and you watch the game, but all of the behind the scenes stuff, as much as people pretend they know, people don't actually know these things. And people always say, and it's a quite a big thing in the Premier League, and for all our fans who only watch the Premier League, it's a big thing that you see where you think, oh, okay, this player's come in at this age and they're playing in the Premier League, and you think to yourself, oh, they must obviously be amazing, they must be ready, but that's not the case 100% of the time. So it's like there's I'll use an example. So let's say Bajcetic from Liverpool. So he's obviously come in, and you can see that the ability's there, but then that physically he hadn't finished growing, so he's getting growing pains and he's injured. So now he's had to be sent out on loan to be able to get that game time at the higher level, and not just in your under 23s or etc. But it's so funny how from each league and all around the world it changes dependent on sort of what that country's sort of style of football is. So it's like you think, oh, Championship's like probably one of the best leagues out of all the leagues in the world, even though it's our second division. But then you actually say, okay, well, in Eredivisie, technically it's actually better quality of football than it is in the Championship. And then if you go all the way to Osijek, you're like, okay, now this is a mix of the both. And I just find it fascinating, mate. But we are going to go to ad break, because we will end up releasing a pod that is 3 hours long. So
yeah, of course.
we're going to go to ad break, and after the ad break, we're going to delve a little bit more into sort of a chief scout and assistant sporting director role, and we are going to be talking about Mr. Shane O'Mac, Moneybags himself, Tony Bloom. So we will see you on the flip side.
This podcast is brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League as a whole, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day.
And we are back. Thank you to Past Joe for recording that audio so I could put it in there without having to speak live. So, me and Bless want to come to you with so we want to get the inside scoop of some chief scout and assistant sporting director. And we haven't really spoke about Brighton that much. So, as you said before, I just want you to quickly touch on it again, sort of, as we're going to sort of leave the scout as a term behind, and we're going to move on to sort of the assistant sporting director side. So just quickly sum it up what that role is and what that role sort of entails.
Yeah, so really, like I said before, for me, it's leading the recruitment team and identifying players and being the right hand of someone that's going to say we should bring this player in. But it's more complex than that. Really, by that point, I would have had a conversation with the agent, made sure the player's interested to join, know exactly the transfer fee, know exactly the salary. So then things can be very quick. It's basically just, and then in terms of assisting the sporting director, is very just making sure that he can have the steps as quick as he can. So that can be, he doesn't have to then, like I said, ask for the salary. He doesn't have to ask for the transfer fee. It's then for him is to persuade the player even more to join. And then outside of recruitment, for me, then that can be, for me, I watch all the training sessions. So for me, it's monitoring the manager as well as the coaches. So for me, it would be identifying coaches as well if it came to this. And through identifying coaches, it will just have to match the style of play that we're looking for. So, for example, we want to play 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 attacking. Okay, the manager doesn't have to play this at all times, but this is the idea. Maybe other characteristics could be he plays with youngsters, he has a fresh background of not spending so much money. So these types of things are nice for us because then when it comes to the transfer period, he's not expecting so much money to be spent or players to be signed or and then we also have a good similarity in terms of what we're looking for. So 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. Okay, if the manager comes to me and says he wants a 9.5, then I know, okay, I have these players ready for 9.5. Sorry, but this means like second striker, like sorry, like for the fans that maybe
Some people that listen have just gone,
yeah. Sorry,
what on earth is
yeah.
that, mate?
What is a 9.5? And honestly, like, is for that is key. This is very key that things have to match up. Even the understanding of what an 8-10 is, or a 6-8, or just a 10, you have to match up. Because for us, again, it makes decision making a lot quicker for us if myself, the sporting director, and the head coach all match up for the final decision, because we can't really take too much time when a player arises, especially for how competitive the market is. We have to be one step ahead. So I think in my sort of field and my region, it's very vital to have the assistant sporting director. Again, I would say probably where I am, where it's in Croatia, then you don't really need to have it in the middle, like maybe Eredivisie and etc. But then maybe Premier League, La Liga probably do, because again they have to be even quicker than their rivals. So maybe the assistant works in that aspect as well. And as well, I would say that maybe for like Brighton, for example, it would make sense because of how they are positioned in terms of their recruitment team. They definitely have more scouts than I do. Uh, so for them, it's probably worth having this assistant. But then, but then again, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Obviously, what it's like in other clubs in terms of the assistant sporting director, whether how hands-on he is in terms of identifying coaches, whether that's just down to the sporting director, I'm not sure. But I imagine it's probably similar as well as recruitment. Maybe not so much. Maybe they have a chief scout and an assistant. I'm not sure. But for me, I do both. So I'm very busy. I'm very busy.
So just a quick one actually. So I find it really interesting that you're speaking about. So the manager will come to you and be like, "Give me this. I want this one." Right, and then you're like, "Okay, well I've got dun 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 lined up." At Brighton, there seems to be, and people that don't even support Brighton will be able to tell you like how are Brighton sort of respawning these players who are so talented. So, for example, when Caicedo left, Belieber was there. So, similar profile, almost like a bit eerily too similar. And then you have, like, for example, McAllister. And then with McAllister going, you have sort of like bringing in, maybe not exactly like McAllister, but like you have Enciso, and you have these players that can essentially be that next McAllister. But these players aren't even here for like that long. So McAllister was there for a lot longer. Caicedo was there for like 2 seasons. So how, in terms of Brighton, how hard do you think it is to be able to sort of get that exact, or even if it's easy, getting that exact like for like sort of replacement through the door? Obviously, it would have changed a bit now because we have a new manager, but it seems to be okay. This is the player. If that player goes, so they've made 100 million, probably more from Caicedo, but they have literally. Do you know when you say, "Oh, we've got McDonald's at home, we've got dinner at
Yeah,
home"?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
they've got Belieber at home, so it
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
Do you know
They
what I mean?
really do. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does that? How hard or easy is that sort of process?
I mean, I think for Brighton, at least they used to be. Whether that's changed, they have positional scouting. Maybe that's changed.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not sure. So maybe that's why it's so quick, because they have such
Mhm.
a focus on positions. So then
Yeah.
when this position needs to be identified, they already have such a list. And so I th- I might be wrong, but obviously I imagine the scouts within this role would just solely be, say, for example, centre back. They're only going to watch centre backs, centre back, centre back, centre back, centre back. They're not going to touch other positions. And I think for me, why that would work so well is because you have this constant cycle. Okay, this is how Brighton play. This is how Brighton plays. So you can identify immediately whether it's going to work straight away. And again, okay, this probably costs quite a bit because you have to have positions, and I don't know how many in each position for scouting. But again, this makes it a lot quicker to identify globally because these scouts are only just focusing on centre back, so you could probably filter through each league quite quickly. And then this is then when the gems come across even more, because one, you can watch a lot more in terms of maybe if you come across one player in South America, you could watch over and over this same player, whether you think they're ready or not for Brighton. Um, so I think for them, with this way of scouting, is very good in terms of time. And this is why they're ready all the time and they're very quick. They're ahead of the time. But but I believe there are other clubs now following this strategy. I think Newcastle are the same. I
Hmm.
also think maybe that's because of the connections from the past between Staff and Brighton and Newcastle. So I think that is how they do it. That is a way that from my understanding, is how I believe is probably the future of scouting. Because not many clubs spend as much money as you would think in recruitment teams. So Brighton obviously do it very well. So I think they recognise that.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if it had changed. And I imagine a lot of the time, for example, when you said Caicedo, I imagine even at that point they probably had Baleba already there waiting, or they had this player ready to come next. Like Matt
Yeah.
O'Reilly, they probably had Matt O'Reilly on the same list for like 2 seasons or
Yeah.
however long. Because I mean, it's not like Matt O'Reilly's just come out of nothing. They would have
No.
seen Matt O'Reilly. And then in terms of them, I'm not sure, obviously, whether they take data, etc., how in depth it is. But positional scouting, I believe, is the future for a lot of clubs. But especially, I mean, if this is how Brighton are doing it, I'm sure a lot of clubs are confident to follow. But like I said, just going back just quickly, is maybe Brighton's probably one of the clubs that do recognise the recruitment teams.
Mm.
Not a lot of other clubs spend a lot of money on their staff for recruitment, so maybe this is why. And obviously, again, just to add on to that quickly, is these positional scouts, I imagine, are like ex-players, ex-coaches for these positions, for example.
Yeah.
So they are experts in these fields. Not that you have to be a player or an ex-coach to be an expert in the field, but I mean, it's probably for them.
Makes more
It
sense.
makes
Doesn't it,
more
really?
sense. Yeah, it makes more sense for that.
God bless.
Jamie, I just wanted to take you back to when you were talking about sort of the structure certain clubs have. So at Brighton, Fabian Hertz is a head coach. Is there any particular difference in terms of like their influence in the boardroom and in recruitment rooms, like a head coach and a manager? Because it's quite well documented, but to hear
Uh,
good insight would be good.
That's a good
I mean,
question.
honestly, we don't have the head coach really isn't in too much say. I mean, of course, maybe there's time when he needs a certain position, but we all are aware of this. Maybe we have a shortage of centre backs because of injuries, so it's not strange for him to ask. I mean, it's okay. At the end of the day, really, for us, the director and the head coach obviously do have a say, but for us, the director has a stronger say.
Wow.
But I'm not sure whether that's the same everywhere else. I know a lot of clubs just focus on the head coach or the director.
So
Uh,
would the head coach be able to recommend his own player? Say if he's found a player that he wants, could he bring him up as like a suggestion? And
yeah,
how
yeah,
serious would that suggestion be taken as well?
yeah, yeah. Of course. Like even for example, if we have, say, we need a third choice centre back or fourth choice centre back, maybe he has someone in the past that used to play for him, and he says, "Okay, look, I know I trust this player. He played here, played here. I know he's available for loan or free. Do you know the player, or maybe Jamie is worth looking at, or the director will send it to me, for example. This is typically how it would go. It would only really be kind of players that he's worked with. So then this is something that we are heavy on, is we need to kind of trust and understand the player before they arrive, rather than just plucking out players because he's seen or thinks
Yeah,
they're
because they
like
scored
really
against
for
him, and
us.
he's like, mate, what can I do
Yeah,
this guy?
like for us, just not because it's wrong, but just to be so like solely focused on the pitch. Because I mean, I would like my idea would be okay. Of course, he's concerned about the team, but would be in the evening to be thinking of tomorrow's training. Then think, how can I help the director or the chief scout to find a player? Okay, of course, he can bring up his own players from the past that maybe can help, but this would be the main aim. Is I have that role of identifying players, the director, and then the head coach can just focus solely on the training and the match. That way you kind of get the best out of all departments, but of course it can mix. I mean, the same as he can sometimes come to me and ask about the training because he knows I go to the training all the time. So it's kind of, I'm not sure what it's like in other clubs. Of course, maybe you have more powerful managers or more powerful sport directors, or maybe not even either. Maybe you have powerful other members in the club that like to take control. But I think solely at the end of every recruitment, it does really just come down to trust. Whether the owner is someone that trusts someone, or I think that's the main thing. And there's always a reason why the decision comes from the same decision every single time. But yeah, sorry that was a bit long-winded, but
That's
No,
right.
no, that's good, mate. I'm just so curious though, because like in that situation, if I'm the head coach
Mhm.
and I've got ex players, but ex players are injured, and then I'm sort of like we go through a window and I don't get the position that I need, and then performances are dropping, but it's so obvious because we're leaking so many goals.
Mm.
Surely, as a head coach, I'm like looking at you lot like, help me. Do you know what I mean? Like, surely you've got to line me up some players, because if not, you lot are going to sack me because
Yeah,
you lot didn't get the players that I needed.
yeah. That's the difficult part of it, really, because, and I feel like that is going to become more of a factor maybe in a lot of clubs. Is a lot of head coaches won't have so much say,
Hmm.
which is difficult because so many factors, because a head coach can come because maybe promised X amount of money or X amount of players or this and this, and then when they come, things change. But this is normal in football. Things can change in these factors. I can understand maybe it would make me feel uncomfortable as a head coach going to training and saying, okay, we still don't have this left back. Where is the left back? When?
Yeah.
Where?
When is the
going on?
left back?
So for me, I can fully understand, but of course we don't shut a barrier where he can't come and ask. We are vocal in terms of that. And that again is the other thing when you identify the head coach is someone that you can have this relationship with, and aren't gonna go extreme and maybe go to the media or go, because at the same time maybe the reason the left back isn't here is the same as why we want the left back as well. It's not always just down to that. And of course sometimes I think probably in Watford negotiating was a lot quicker. You could probably finish it within one day, convince a player within one day, whereas sometimes for us it can be one day or 2 weeks. It's really, really strange. A lot of the time it's always players that you expect to take one day will take 2 weeks, and then players you don't expect to take 2 weeks take one day. It's strange. And also as well, the head coach can always recommend the players, but again, it's not as easy because maybe he doesn't know the agent, doesn't know how much we can spend on this position or how much the player will cost, salary, etc. So we try to just focus on freedom for the training pitch, but of course all three have to come together, because at the end of the day the results, okay, not just on us three, but I think most of the people point the fingers at the chief scout, sport director, and the head coach. But in terms of that, yeah, he can talk, but I think that's kind of the modern thing. Maybe will be that head coaches won't have so much say. But again, we come from a lot of time where people also kind of praise managers more, I feel. So, for example, De Zerbi, people praised his style of play a lot of the time, even when he was missing players. So I feel like there's less criticism nowadays towards head coaches, because I think people understand a little bit more maybe how things work behind the scenes, or at least people hear how things work behind the scenes. So it's difficult. I mean, for a modern day head coach, I think is a lot of pressure because you do have less control. So
Yeah, so bless. I don't know about you, mate, but considering that what we do is we basically speak about football 5 times a week, it's quite refreshing to not have to really say anything, isn't it?
Yeah, honestly, I am just so fascinated. I've got so many questions, but I'm looking at the time as well. I'm like, need to write these questions down and just send them over, I think.
So, thank you for that again. But we're going to go to another ad break. This is the last one. Then we've got our last segment, which we are going to be talking about Brighton's window. We're going to be thinking about where we need to improve and where Jamie thinks we need to improve, and maybe some transfers that we should be making. So we will see you on the flip side.
Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at the Global Sports Podcast Network called Zencastr. Zencastr makes it easy to start a high-quality podcast built for growth from day one. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, your nose, and 22 other speech patterns. Zencastr makes it super easy to start a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Hello and welcome back to our third and final segment of this juicy deluxe 20th anniversary podcast. That is what I'm going to call it from now on. Okay, so Jamie, Brighton dug into their pockets in this window. Here comes the money. We've been spending that dollar. We love to see it. So, what are your overall? Do you know what? I'm going to throw this out to both of you, actually, not just you, Jamie, but I'm going to throw it out to both of you. What are your guys' sort of overall thoughts on the window so far? Bless, we'll start with you because we don't care so much about what you have to say.
I was going to say I'll go first and then let the expert actually talk. Overall thoughts on the window. I think we've made some smart signings that are going to be useful in the future. They've come in and a lot of them are looked quite impressive already. Yankuba Minteh, Matt Swafer as well. I've been quite impressive. Obviously, he's injured, but I think those are both players that are in the starting lineup already. But you can tell that they've got a high enough ceiling to be even more impressive players in the Premier League. So overall, I'd say it's been good and pretty happy with it, to be honest.
Yeah. Freeman?
No, yeah, the same. Honestly, I'm very surprised by how much they spent, but I think they did very good. I think they did very still smart. Usually when someone spends so much, it doesn't seem so smart. But I
Chelsea?
think Brighton did a good job, and also their outgoings as well. I think was strong. I was, the first time maybe Brighton, I was a bit concerned in terms of academy because sometimes they do bring in one or two in a season, but they've done well in terms of loaning out players like O'Mahony to Portsmouth, Kozia Dewsbury, Rushworth as well went to Hull, Andrew Moran went to Stoke, I believe. Afire went to Blackpool.
Yeah.
Strong. Like I was surprised because I thought, okay, now you're reeling in the players, and you still see in pre-season these players coming through on the off the bench, and I was concerned for the young ones, but they managed to get them out as well. And I mean, even the game the other day in the cup, it was a strong side compared to when I saw them last year. They played a lot of under 21s. I think, okay, a lot came off the bench, but I think from the first team, I think it was only Amari Samuels, the left back, played. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was another one. So they're very strong even in that competition. So I think depth wise, they're very strong this time round. And then, yeah, I mean they look strong already in the league. So I think Tony Bloom's quite happy right now.
Can we get a out of 10 ranking? Because for some
Oh,
people that listen, that they need to have the ranking, otherwise it doesn't count.
okay.
That's me, basically. I'm just talking about
Wow.
myself.
I think it's very strong. Very strong. I'm going to go, 8.5. 8.5 out of
Eight
10.
and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
That is it is pretty strong. It is pretty strong. So in terms of we spoke a bit obviously about the transfer window, sort of like overall what's going on. Where do you think that Brighton need to improve? So in the windows coming, or whether that's internally through players in the academy that some people might not know about who can make that jump, or just in general, where do you think that the improvement needs to come from? It's been obviously a very small sample size of games, but
I mean, like I just said, Brighton's depth is very strong, and even with the players that I've listed that have gone out on loan, very strong. Like for example, Mahoney that went to Portsmouth, he's almost like a like for Evan Ferguson, really. So if he plays quite a lot at Portsmouth, it'd be interesting to see what they do with him next year, especially with Welbeck. And then
talking about Welbeck, anything about
yeah,
Welbeck going on this podcast,
Yeah,
mate.
I was about to say, what about Welbeck?
and
Then I
then
realised it's a special episode.
and and then yeah, like a lot. This is the thing for me. What I'm gonna say is, a lot of the players on loan are forwards, and this window was heavy with forwards, and I think depth wise is forwards is the strongest point. Maybe for the future, it would have to probably be a centre back. I think I was a little bit surprised they didn't shuffle around. Maybe I know Dunk's experienced and Van Heck is very young, but I was surprised maybe they didn't bring in a different profile, especially with the history of injuries with like Adam Webster. Whether maybe it was probably the time to to see what to do with Adam Webster, and we also have Igor as well. I would say centre back, but also it'd be interesting to see how Afire does at Blackpool as a centre back. I'm not sure how much he played in pre-season, but Noel Atom in the under-21s, I know he was featured and travelled, but I'm not sure how much or if he did play. And the reason I'm going to mention Noel Atom now from the 21s is because he is a left centre back, and I think maybe that is what they need to look for. Maybe. I don't want to comment too much because they are very strong in recruitment, so I feel harsh. But like, even for example, I'm not sure whether he was linked or not, but Olivia Boscagli from PSV I think would have been nice. Centre back.
Oh yeah, we were
Say,
linked with him quite heavily. Yeah,
yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
and then even uh, I don't know, maybe someone that's not going to play so much in the league, maybe a bit experienced, young, like maybe even like Joe Gomez would have been nice just to have in as the second or third choice. Experienced, young, still has a lot of time left in the league. Not much of a gamble
That'd be a
because I feel
mad
like
signing.
you're going to come to kind of maybe gamble time when it comes to centre back because, like I said, with Webster, okay, I think he's a good player, but again, how long does it have to be till he pushes up? Dunk, how much time does he have there? Van Heck, can he control it alone? And Igor, you don't know anything much of Igor, so I think that is the position I'm mainly concerned about. And the other one, maybe because I know you have Estupinian, but left back as well because you've been playing Hinchelwood left back, and I know Amari Samuels did play in the cup.
Yeah, he started in the cup and then was
Yeah,
bought off for Estupinian to sort of get some more
yeah,
minutes. But
yeah,
obviously, we signed Kadioglu, who can play in both. But we, in my opinion, well, in all of our opinion, pretty much, we need both anyway. So
yeah.
we need a right back and so obviously you don't know if you can really. Estupinian, if he keeps with the injury issues, then obviously like that's something that Kadioglu, I think, primarily is a left back,
Hmm.
but I think it would be a Stupinian on the left, and then he'll play in right back.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that would be my guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it definitely needs something going on.
yeah,
In terms of going forward, so Yankuba Minteh is a player. Honestly, on this podcast, I think we mentioned him
Once
every 15 minutes.
him and Danny Welbeck, yeah.
Yeah, our podcast favorites. But I'm just really interested in like how the transfer came about because it seemed like obviously Newcastle had to sell and Brighton just took him on. It seemed like they weren't really. Perhaps you were talking about how maybe they have players in certain positions on the list. It seems like they weren't really looking to go and get him, but the opportunity came and they got him. So my question is, with players like that, are they just on like everyone's radar? Everyone sort of knows about them. It's just about what club's ready to take that gamble.
yeah. I mean, when it gets to that sort of level, I feel like every club should know. But then again, like you said, it's about timing, and maybe some clubs think timing can be they're ready to spend or they're not ready to spend. Um, I think for Brighton, I was a little bit. I'm glad he joined because he's exciting, but as well, I'm a bit surprised because, like I said, in terms of depth, but but going back to the timing, then yeah, it has to be. I mean, I feel like if you don't know the player, then maybe something's wrong. I'm not sure why you wouldn't recognize, and it's opportunity. It's opportunity, of course, because as well in England, I mean, it's such a small country, but even for players, the region of where you're going to play means a lot. Um,
We got a pair
yeah,
and a harvester
and the harvester next to the
and a
training
harvester.
ground.
Yeah. So
So you got both really, and I'm not sure if you do Newcastle that comes close. So yeah, it just comes down to opportunity really, and I imagine on the list he would have been next, or at least a top 3, because I don't think it will take Brighton too much convincing to bring a player nowadays. So it must have been one of the ones they really wanted. And I mean, the player probably was in conversation beforehand, maybe.
And,
Go
and
on.
just to follow up as well, I was going to ask, where do you think he can go in the game? Do you think his ceiling's as high as we think? Because I think we've been raving about him, but then we got a bit worried
Just
against the
come out.
United.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
sneaky
no.
against United.
I think he's got a very high ceiling, but then at the same time, I feel like when you're at the level of Brighton, even if it doesn't work out, your ceiling is still so high. Like you can then go on and go abroad and still play at such a high club. I mean, we even saw it last year with like Ansu Fati, for example. Like I know he got injured, but we came from Barcelona, and if someone said that to me 5 years ago, I'd have said you're crazy. But then again, now he's then back at Barcelona, and I see positive stuff about him, and that is crazy.
He was stinky
But I
at
think his
Brighton, to be
ceiling's very
fair.
high. I'm very excited for Brighton fans. To be honest, very excited.
That's mad though, because this is my thing. Is that I've said on previous pods that so we signed Gruder, and I feel like Gruder he would obviously be well known. He's played for Germany. He's captained Germany, like in the youth level as well.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was like the top target. And then I feel like because of is it PSR, ESR, PSR?
PSR.
Yeah, because of the PSR stuff, I feel like because there's no chance. I don't care what level of football that you're at. You're not looking at Jacob Murphy and then looking at Yankuba Minteh and going, "Take Jacob Murphy, mate." There's just no way, because Jacob Murphy will have no like sell on value, so they basically have to keep him. Whereas Minteh basically they have to sell him because he's young, and then he hasn't even played at that in the Premier League sort of top level yet, and they've still got, what was it, like 30 million for him. So I just feel like it was such an opportunistic signing, but I feel like it's a good one, to be honest. We haven't even seen Gruder yet, so we obviously won't know, but I think it was just the ultimate opportunist, moving like Edge with money in the bank, mate.
For sure. I mean, even now it's very. I like it a lot, because even next season you're gonna have then, like I said, like Kozia Dewberry come back, and then you have this another argument where there's so much to compete with for depth. I'm
Yeah.
quite jealous, to be honest, of Brighton forwards. Which again, if you told me 5 years ago, I'd think you're crazy. But this it's very they're doing such a good job there. They're such a good job, and like I said, like they've spent, but it's very smart. Like very smart. I mean, it's quite rare for a club to spend that much, and it all seems to tick. But
Yeah.
so far, it's looking good. It's looking good.
Right. So it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for taking time out to actually come on to this soon to be the most popular Premier League football podcast ever in the world. Soon to come.
Soon to come.
I have been Joe Richardson, and I have been joined by Blessings Chibamba.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on, Joe. Guys, thanks for listening as well.
I'm always on this pod, mate.
Oh, Jamie, sorry.
Yeah, and just thank you both. Thank you both for having me on the special 20th anniversary episode, and I hope to be here on the 1,000th one, please.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I've been Joe Richardson, and next week, because we're not going to be doing a pod every day, unfortunately, this is why we've given you a super juicy deluxe one for today. But next week we are going to be it's going to be James Guerra versus Blesius Chibamba versus Joe Richardson for the Big Fat Daily Brighton Quiz Championship, hosted by Richard Parr, next week, and we will see you there. Thank you very much for listening.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.